everyone, welcome to Leadership is Language. My name is Anika Molesworth and I am your host. I would firstly like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land that I live and work on, the Willakali people. I am based out in far western New South Wales, which are the arid lands of Australia, but today I am talking to someone who is in a much more tropical environment in northern Queensland. The Leadership is Language series is part of the Young Farming Champions program, and it exposes some of Australia's foremost thought leaders on communicating how we show leadership by the language and communication styles we use. Today, I am very excited to be joined by Francesca Earp. Now, Franny describes herself as a girl who loves adventure and getting her hands dirty. She has spent time at a white shark research centre in South Africa, tending to goats in Australia, and investigating foot and mouth disease in Laos. Her warmth and intelligence makes her an incredible agricultural researcher, and I know I'm going to learn a lot from her today. Welcome, Francesca.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Such a pleasure. Now, before we kick off on the more specific questions relating to leadership and communication, I was wondering if you could tell us a bit more about your background on your journey these past few years and how you've come about to be sitting there in Cairns.
Sure. So when I was at school, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. I was interested in animals, but I didn't really have an agricultural background. So I did my Bachelor of Animal and Veterinary Bioscience at University of Sydney. And when I did that, I really came more into the wildlife management and policy aspect of the course. So like you said, I went to South Africa and I was working at a white shark research centre. And I kind of decided that was my calling. I thought that's the way I was going to go. And it got to my honours year and there was a project open to go to Laos to work in foot and mouth disease and do a cost benefit analysis of the control there. And I thought, why not? I'll just go on a little bit of a holiday, do my research there. And then I kind of still thought I would go back to the shark research once I did that. And I went to Laos and I just loved it. I loved being in country, working in the field. And I also loved that you could really see the immediate impact of the research that you were doing. So I came back from Laos and about a week later, I got asked if I wanted to go back full time as the in-country implementation officer for two of our projects there. So I went back, finished my last semester of uni, submitted my honours thesis, and then flew back to Laos. And then I lived there for a year and a half working on two of our projects and also started my PhD. And then I moved back to Australia in March. And because of COVID and travel restrictions, I've now had to suspend my PhD. But now I'm in Cairns doing my Masters of Global Development. So a long, windy journey, but here we are.
That's incredible. And where you were in Laos was Luang Prabang, was that right?
That's right. Yeah. So based in Luang Prabang and all over the place.
For those who haven't been there, it is some of the most gorgeous scenery of, tropical forests and, these amazing serrated mountains and caves to explore. It's really incredible. So you have a great interest in getting good information into the right hands. And you say to do that, we need to consider social and cultural factors of a community before attempting to deliver training and development activities. This is hugely important for people like you and me working in international agricultural development. So I was wondering what led you to think this way? And was it some learning by trial and error in one of your projects?
Yeah, definitely learning by trial and error, a learning that I'm definitely still undertaking currently. I think the first time I really thought about it was when we were in country collecting data, and we were collecting a lot of data about working out when farmers were buying and selling livestock. And we were noticing that they weren't selling at the times that we thought they would get the highest price return for that. So we were doing all these conversations with them and we thought maybe they didn't understand our price calendars for thinking that that would be the best income for them to receive. And then I ran a focus group discussion session and it was much more flexible than our sort of more structured surveys that we were normally doing with farmers. And in that we just said, do you know when you think you would get the best price? And they said yes. And they said the same sort of time that we thought in the calendar. And then we said, so why aren't you selling at that point? And then they went into this whole really cultural explanation of the fact that livestock was something that they inherited from their parents, and so they didn't necessarily want to sell just for profit because they felt like it had emotional attachment because it was inherited from their parents, and also discussing the fact that they had it as the more cattle you could see in their paddock, the more wealthy they looked, because farmers could look in and see, oh, they've got 10 buffalo compared to my 5. And so there were all these social and cultural reasons why they weren't selling their livestock, which was just something we had never, as a team based in Sydney, had never necessarily thought about. And that was when I really thought we just need to be having those proper conversation with these farmers about why they're doing things and what's influencing those decisions they're making.
Yeah, such an important learning. And so after you realized that, that's why they weren't selling the cattle at that time of year, or, they were holding on to them for much longer periods of time, were you able to incorporate that into your projects and your strategy going forward?
Yeah, definitely. So what I really think about, particularly agricultural extension, I think that we really need to tailor it back to the reasons why farmers are making decisions, because we can put all this money into these really long programs, but if they're not, if it's not going to uptake with the farmers, then there's no point doing it. So we really were able to tailor a lot of that afterwards, particularly with disease mitigation, because we could talk to farmers about the fact that if you are going to keep your livestock for so much longer, then you want to make sure you're protecting them from disease. And we talked about them having a buffalo bank and then almost putting insurance on their buffalo bank by picking up some of our other strategies and techniques that we'd been trying to train. So once I understood what was changing the farmers' decision making, then it meant that we could really facilitate to that. So I think we had a lot better success in farmer uptake following on from that.
Yeah, brilliant. One of the funny things I found when I was in Laos doing my master's, I was very proudly telling people that I was a goat farmer back here in Australia. And it wasn't until like a few months of being in country that one of my project managers said, people who have goats, they have really thick ears because they do not listen to the other people's advice, because goats are so naughty. They always escape, they get onto other people's field. So being a goat farmer was actually not something to, brag about.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure I did many things like that in Laos too.
But I still love my goats.
Yeah.
So I find working in international agricultural development incredibly interesting. Like, there is not a day that goes by that I don't learn something new about how food is produced, or, another detail of the agro-ecosystem and how it works. And it's that real thirst for knowledge that drives me. And I'm wondering what motivates you.
I think similar. So like I said, when I first went to Laos and I got there and I just fell in love with, there's a lot of aspects of international ag that you could love: the travel and meeting people and being accepted in the community. The fact that when I left Laos, I felt like I had strong friendships in Laos where I never thought I necessarily would have before I went is amazing. But also I just think I've got that drive of feeling like I can do something. I always discuss with people almost this idea that I feel like I'm going to save the world, which is obviously a really big goal to give yourself. And I don't think it's something that one person can achieve, but I like the idea of thinking that I can wake up every day and I can do something, even if it's reading a paper about how to communicate better or working out what female farmer empowerment actually means. Just being able to learn and then hoping that one day I can put that into use is what definitely gets me up and out of bed in the morning.
Yeah, that's awesome. And you are absolutely doing incredible things. I think people who work in agriculture, they are making such a meaningful contribution to ensuring food is on the plates for people in their community. And, wider things of actually ensuring, biodiversity conservation in these environments, having thriving rural communities. So yeah, agricultural researchers like yourself and people right along the food system are doing incredible things. And that's why I love working in this space so much too. So what have been the greatest enablers for you to get where you have? Has it been the education side of things? Has it been the people you have met in your networks? Or has it been something else that has significantly helped you along your way?
I think there's a lot of different aspects that help me get to where I am. Definitely the opportunity to go to Laos, both in my honours and then move for the job, was amazing. I don't think I would be doing this or realise that this was my passion if I didn't have that opportunity. So I'm very lucky for that. And I think also opportunities down the track. My parents always laugh now because obviously when I was in Laos, I faced challenges like everybody does when they're working in international ag. And I had things like the first house I moved into, my toilet used to flood all the time, and like my sink would flood and everything. It was just a crazy house. And my parents always joke with me that I've always kind of been the person that loved going on school camp, and I love getting dirty, and I don't really mind about all that stuff. I just find it an adventure. And I think that also has really enabled me. I just think the fact that I'm able to laugh when things don't go to plan has really helped, because I think it's quite rare for everything to go to plan in international ag, if ever. I'm not sure if it ever happens completely. So yeah, I think that's definitely helped too.
Yeah, I could not agree more. Like, having a good sense of humor when you go overseas to, a place that's far away from home, when you don't have, the comforts of family and food you're used to be thrown into a culture which is quite different, a language that you possibly can't understand. Being able to laugh at yourself and laugh at the situation, it really gets you through some of those tougher days.
Yeah. And I think it helps a lot. Like in the beginning, I was quite worried because I kind of sensed that I didn't have the experience that I felt I needed to be there. So my first couple of field trips, I was quite like, everything has to go perfectly and I need to show that I'm supposed to be here. And then by the time I sort of laughed and relaxed into it, that's when farmers started to chat with me and we'd go to their place for lunch. And then that's actually when I built relationships with the farmers that we were working with. So I think it helps in a lot of aspects, in just like getting you through the day, but also in helping you connect with the groups that you're working with.
Yeah, absolutely. And the people in Laos and Southeast Asia, they're just so warm-hearted, and they have this beautiful comedy and humor too. Like they also love to laugh.
Yeah, they really do.
Yeah. So my next question was, you are working on some big and complex challenges, like most people who work in agriculture. And I'm interested to hear how you sustain your energy. Like, what revitalizes you after a long and tiring work week, whether that's here in Australia or when you were actually over in Laos?
It's a very good question. I think it can really bring you down, the weight of what you're working with. And again, when I first moved to Laos, I think I really felt that weight. Because like I said, I wanted to save the world and I was so certain that that's what we could do just within one project. And then I think it's once you realize that it's so much bigger than just what you're doing and just that project, and just the idea that you're there to do the very best that you can. And if you're helping in some aspect, then I think that's a great progress for you. And I think that really helps me. And also just knowing the right people. I think I met some wonderful friends in Laos who worked in development, but in all different aspects. I had a friend who was a vet and a friend that worked at the hospital. And so we could sort of all come together and discuss the fact that we wanted to achieve so much, and that we had to kind of work around ways of just taking the little wins and knowing that those little wins actually do account to much bigger wins in the community that you're working within.
Yeah, they absolutely do. Yeah, I can think of so many times, like, when I would visit a village and, you see children who aren't getting enough nutrients and that's affecting their development. And, you experience a flood or, torrential rain in the middle of the dry season, and you understand, the implications of climate change on these really rural and, challenging farming systems. So having strategies to look after yourself, I think, is incredibly important, like that personal care for both your mind and your body. And I know when I was in Laos, just evening walks along the Mekong River and sort of seeing life, you know, the fishermen and, you know, people setting up their stalls and selling food to the people who came along on the mopeds, and that, you know, beautiful conversation with the local people. It really, you know, yeah, it really kept me going to think these are incredible people. They seem so resilient. They seem to be really thinking of, you know, how can we do things better and like look after each other in our communities. Yeah, so I learned a lot over there about both how to help the community that I was, you know, venturing into, but also how to look after myself so I could actually sustain that energy and work.
Definitely. And I think, like you say about discussing with the locals and watching how they deal with things, I think what I found, I was the only member of the Sydney team, and I was working with 3 core members of the Laos team. And that really helped me as well once I broke that barrier that we're all working for the same team, and I was able to sort of give them autonomy over the project and also see how they dealt with things, because they've been working in that environment for much longer than I have. So it also just helped to be able to take on some of that resilience, and they're very happy to laugh when things don't go to plan, and just sort of acknowledging that and doing the same. And I think that really helped our teamwork, and it also just helped make sure that everyone felt like they were part of the team, because we were all responding to things in the same way. So I agree, that definitely helps.
Yeah, that's beautiful that we are all on the same team. We're all working together to try and solve these challenges. My final question for you. So for audience members who are working in international agricultural development and who are interacting with people from different backgrounds and who have different perspectives, what tips would you give them to be more effective in their communication?
I think my number one tip would just be listening, which I think seems like it would be the most obvious number one tip. But it's just so important, like we discussed before, to really understand the group that you're working with. And so it's much more active listening, of not just listening to what's being said, but looking around and looking how the community operates. So an example of that is, I'm now very passionate about female farmer empowerment. And I went through a phase where everyone was saying, you know, females are invited to farmer training groups, which is true, they were, but they were sitting at the back of the room. They weren't answering questions. They didn't want to talk. And that's when I realized that that's obviously something that we need to bring in. So I count that as listening, even though that's looking. But the idea of just, you really need to understand your group that you're working with to then understand what you're needed from. And that's a really important aspect of communication.
Yeah.
And I would say that's probably my biggest tip. Once you can do that, which I'm still learning to do as well, but once you can do that, I think you can go really far with your communication, because by the time you're listening, you're also able to assess that things have been successful or not, which is another really big thing, because again, they're not always successful the first time. So being able to understand that as well really ensures that you're having quite active communication where it's working on both sides.
Absolutely, could not agree with you more. Listening and understanding is absolutely the foundation of then being able to communicate well and to make that difference that we're hoping to achieve. So thank you so much, Franny, for being here on Leadership is Language, and to share your thoughts and ideas on both leadership and communication styles. I really appreciate it, and I'm sure everyone who watches is going to learn a lot from your wise words. So thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.